What is going on, miners, and welcome back to the Hobbyist Miner channel. Well, today I'm going to go about showing you guys how I built this custom mining rig frame for my H510 Pro Riserless motherboard. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and dive into it. What I do is I took a bunch of pictures along the way of building this frame out, and I thought I'd do something different. I'm going to show you guys pictures, and I'll talk about why I did what I did, and give some explanation. So if you guys are looking to do the same thing, you absolutely can. So jumping in here, I laid out kind of what I thought the layout of my mining frame would look like. You know, the foundation was the hardest part. Everything else was easy. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do a power supply on each side. Now, these aren't the power supplies that I'm going to be using in the build, but I needed two ATX power supplies, so I grabbed two of the Ares Games ones that I had, and I put the motherboard in the middle. So that was kind of my idea from here. So what I did was I went ahead and I measured from one side of the power supply to the other, from one, all the way to the other side, and I figured out that I needed about, with a little bit of gap for room, about 28 inches total. So my game plan was to take angled aluminum, which traditionally a lot of your frames are made of. You can get it from Home Depot. Let me go ahead and bring up their website here. And you can see that Home Depot has a whole bunch of different angled aluminum. It really comes down to the thickness you're looking for, not only for the actual angled aluminum, but also for the width of each of the sides. Some of them you can get shorter, some of them longer, some of them wider. So if you're looking to build your own custom mining rig frame for your Riserless motherboard, visit your local Home Depot hardware store and take a look at what angled aluminum they have. I wanted to bring this up also to show you guys some ideas on prices, because I think that was very important to go ahead and see and be transparent as to what this cost as we moved along. So jumping back, that was my idea. I went ahead and said, okay, 28 inches long. And then I said, okay, how deep do I need? How much depth do I need between the front of the frame and the rear of the frame? So what I decided on based off of this, I wanted to give myself some room towards the back end side, and I decided on 12 inches. So in my mindset, I needed a 28 by 12 box made out of the angled aluminum. So moving on, let's go ahead and look here. And here's what I ended up coming up with. So this is my workbench out of my garage. It's a workbench, it's nothing pretty. But you can even see there, I sketched on the piece of paper saying I needed 20 inches long by 12 inches. So I went ahead and cut. The nice thing is I have a vise in my garage attached to my workbench. It actually came with the house. It was like a huge win. And I just went ahead and used a Ryobi jigsaw using a metal blade, and I cut everything. So there was 28 inches long and 12 inches up and down. And then I used self-tapping screws. Now I pre-drilled my holes, and I used self-tapping screws, and it worked out beautifully. And I was very happy with it. Here is another picture of that laid out. You can actually see I had a space heater right next to me there on the right-hand side, because at the time of recording this, it was 10 degrees Fahrenheit outside. And so I had my garage closed, I had a sweatshirt on, and I also had a full winter jacket on with my hoods up and everything. And I was determined to get this thing built. So there we are. You see the vise right there, which worked out perfectly for doing these cuts. So we have our square. So then my next thing I wanted to do was I wanted to take hardboard, and I wanted to put hardboard. And this is actually tempered hardboard. You can get this from Home Depot as well. I believe it's just compressed cardboard is the way it works. But you can see there that I got 1/8 in thickness, and I got it 2x4. And I cut it the exact interior size of my box that I made out of the angled aluminum. So I measured inside of the entire thing, and I figured out, okay, give myself a little play. I didn't want it to be perfectly, crazy tight, and the screws from the self-tapping screws were in there as well. So I had to account for that. So I had to measure just inside of where those self-tapping screws were, and I went ahead and cut my tempered hardboard. And if we go over to Home Depot's website, you can see here's some of the prices that we did get. So we got a 1/8 thick, and we got it 2x4. So it wasn't bad in our pricing that you guys can see there, but I wanted to show this to you guys to allow you guys to start to think about what the cost would be to build one of these frames. Jumping back to our photos, so we went ahead and cut it, and bam, there it is. I just laid it in there. I didn't screw it down yet. But there is our tempered hardboard as our foundation because we need something underneath of the motherboard and we need something underneath of the power supplies. And I thought, okay, I could build rails almost with the angled aluminum, but I was like, that's one, a lot of work and it has to be extremely accurate. So I was like, let's do hardboard. And you guys will learn why when I show you guys how I mounted my motherboard. So there is our hardboard that we do have in place. And our next step after this is we need to screw everything down into through the hardboard and into the angled aluminum. So we'll go ahead and do that here. Just got a close-up view for you guys to see exactly what's going on. And here it is. Here is the hardboard. So what I do is I pre-drilled, because you always want to pre-drill. Pre-drill, pre-drill, pre-drill. You don't want things to crack. You don't want any problems or split. So I pre-drilled with a small hole through the hardboard, through the angled aluminum, and then I self-tapped in there with the self-tapping screws again. And bam, we have the foundation for our Riserless motherboard frame. Moving on from there, there it is. You can see a picture. That's exactly how it looks. So you can see, how I came up a little bit away from the screw coming up from the frame. And now, granted, I could go crazy if I wanted to, and I could have used like a grinding wheel to cut that off, but I don't have a grinding wheel, let alone a grinder. If I was a little more hands-on savvy, I'm not. Like, this is a stretch for me. But I could have grinded that down, and then I could have done the hardboard the entire size if I really wanted to go crazy. If I was Seb Heslow, guys, I would have done that, okay? So moving on from there, I laid out my structure. So there's my two power supplies. There's my motherboard, the AsRock H510 Riserless motherboard right in the middle. It turned out pretty cool. I was super excited. I was like, yes, this is turning out really, really nice. So next step, moving on from here, these are just some pictures for you guys to see what it looks like. Okay, this right here, thanks to Chump Change XD, I'll put a link to his channel down below. He 3D printed me these little bases. And I think he just buys these little clips here. But these clips go up underneath through the motherboard. So this allows me to put the motherboard on that hardboard without like putting it flush to the hardboard. Because if you remember, if I go back, you see how the motherboard is down, like the ports are down below because the angled aluminum comes up and you don't want that. So I wanted it to be raised up a tiny bit. So I use these. I don't know what they're called. They're I think he uses them for when he mounts his, he does a lot of CPU mining in his garage and mounts them to the wall. So he uses these for that. So here's what it looks like. So underneath, as you guys can see, I put them underneath in all the traditional spots where you would have motherboard anchors and stuff like that. And I went ahead, they pop through beautifully. They work out nicely. And I put several of them, 2, 4, 6, 8 total on the entire setup. And so far, so good. And then what I did was I used super glue because the super glue it stuck so well here. I didn't need to drill anything. Now, granted, I could have. If I really wanted to, I could have used a self-tapper from the bottom and screwed up through into it. But I thought, we'll just use super glue. We'll make it easy. And that's what we did. So we used super glue and we went ahead and glued everything down. And there you can see what it looks like from underneath. And it works great. You know, get good airflow underneath the board and everything like that. There's our dollar store super glue that we picked up. So we went ahead and we started to put some GPUs in place. Now, as I said before, we'll be using 6600s. This entire rig will be a 6600 rig. I'm really excited to get those in place. So I started to place the cards in place. Where do you think my problem came up? Because, you know, you can't do any of this without running into a problem. It never works out the way that you ever expect. Let's look at some future pictures here. There it is. So if I put a card, you see the card on the end? That's the Gigabyte Eagle 6600. I didn't account for the fact that when you put the graphics card in, it takes up room to the right. So if I go back in photos, I'm going to flip through some photos real quick. I apologize. You can see here in this picture that you see that last slot. It's really close up against the power supply. I didn't think about that until I put the GPUs in. And then I went, oh, shit. I was like, gosh, come on. So it's like, all right, what do I do? You know, what would you do in this situation? You know? So I was like, dang, what do we do here? You know, what options do I have? So, you know, it's not going to fit there. So what do? Remember we talked about our angled aluminum, our length was 28. Well, we need to cut some new pieces. So we needed to go ahead and go to 30. I need to give an additional 2 inches in order to give some space. So I took the whole thing apart and put it all back together. It didn't take that long because I already knew what I was doing. The previous steps took a lot longer because I literally was figuring it out as I went. So here it is. So now we're at 30 inches wide by 12 inches deep. And we got a nice gap between the last GPU. I even tried a thicker GPU. That's the Hellhound. The Hellhound's actually wider. So I was like, I want the widest one possible in the end. And I could stick my hand right in between there. And there you can see, look, nice airflow, a good enough gap there. You know, it's the best you're going to be. I even tried to figure out, like, can I put the power supply somewhere else to get best airflow? But I thought, this is a really good spot. Let's keep it going in this situation. Here's another angle from the left-hand side, kind of seeing what it looks like. And the power supplies, as I said, they're standards. They're not the power supplies I'm going to use. I do have those on order. They should be here soon. I'm going to be using 2 650-watt power supplies in this situation because I want to split the load. It's not that much. I mean, these are 6600s, but you do have 4 Moloch spots that you do need to power, and I don't want to do that off of one strand. So I found some lower end bronze GPUs that I thought would be perfect for this build here. Now I am going to go ahead, once I have everything in place, I don't show it here, and I will put drill a hole through the frame to secure the power supply right to the front of the frame, just like you would with a normal mining rig frame. So moving on from there, I then measured my distance between my 2 power supplies, which was 23 inches, and I went ahead and cut a piece, and I just stuck it there. That is being held by nothing but pressure. And I was like, okay, cool. So that's what I needed. I started to build the structure of it from that perspective, and that worked out really, really well. So then I started to lay out my next pieces. So the pieces on the side, they're about 5.5 inches on the left and the right side. And they come up, they tap in at the bottom and at the top, and it gives a nice brace there to keep the GPUs in place. Now, that bar is a little, I didn't say it's a little wobbly or anything like that, but that bar is significantly sturdier when you have the GPUs screwed down. You know, they add multiple different layers, and I was considering going back through and putting in supports, but I'm like, when the cards are in there and screwed in, they're acting as supports as well, so it's not really needed. So here's a few more pictures of it. Here's a picture of the cards removed, and I went ahead and pre-drilled all of my holes for my cards. Now I'll most likely end up self-tapping those as well. They fit the perfect size that you would with a normal screw that you would use in a frame. So I'll use the self-tappers. So I pre-drilled it with a much smaller bit size, and then I'll self-tap those when I'm ready to go ahead and install the GPUs. I did in the back then create this little like channel sandwich for my solid state drive. This is a solid state drive, actually came to me from AAA Wave. They supplied the Lexar 128 gigabyte solid state drive as well as the AsRock H510 Pro BTC motherboard. So I built a little channel in the very back side of the frame. You can see I got a nice gap between the back of the motherboard and the frame for these types of things. I'm also going to be doing some cable management in the back and tying it down with a zip tie that have the hoops in them directly to the hardboard to keep all of the wiring in good place. Here you can see with the solid state drive removed, it just slides right in. It's a nice tight fit. I can remove it easily if I need to. It's nothing crazy. So here's what we end up looking like by the time we're completely done with our entire setup. It didn't take long. It probably took me about an hour. Most of it was figuring it out. I had no game plan going into this. I really didn't know where I'd end up. That little frame, that little support frame we have for the GPUs there, that was something I literally came up with as I was building this, because in my mind, I originally was going to go with a traditional frame. I was going to build a traditional mining frame, just low profile. And then after I got into this, I was like, this works out perfectly. So the only other thing I might do is put supports on each of the corners to raise it up. So to boost it up like a typical frame, you have that, but I'm not sure that I need to because the motherboard's boosted up. So like there's airflow underneath of that. It's very sturdy and it works out really, really well. Here's some more pictures here to give you guys a view of how everything turned out. And now let's go ahead and jump over to our camera. Okay, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that kind of walkthrough of building this out. I thought we'd jump over to the camera and take a little bit of a closer look here. You can see here's all those holes that are pre-drilled. They're very small, but as I said, we're going to use the self-tapping screws. Power supplies, these aren't the final ones. These are the Aries game ones. These are just 750 watt power supplies. They're not fully modular. The ones that I ordered are fully modular, and you guys will see that in the build video. I'm not going to go through and do this entire build today, but it will be later on this week, at the end of the week, that I'm going to do a full build video on this because I'm waiting on the power supplies. I did discuss some of the hardware that we are using in this build in a previous video, so I'm going to put a link to that in the upper right hand corner and one down below. If you guys have any questions on this, please leave comments down below. I don't have a write-up on how to build this. In all honesty, this wasn't super expensive. Once I was all said and done, if I was to go ahead and throw an estimate out there, I'd say I probably built this entire thing for $50, if not less. The most expensive thing really was your angled aluminum, and I was looking to see what mine was here, and this is 3/4 inch. Is what it was. So the thickness is 1/16 of the total thickness of it, and then it's 3/4, and I bought it in 48-inch lengths. So all said and done, this wasn't so bad. Would I do this again? Well, if it was a Riserless motherboard situation, yes. I mean, you're kind of forced to, unless you have a spare server case sitting around, which I absolutely don't. But if you're thinking about doing something like this for just a traditional 6-card GPU frame, I'd reconsider. For the amount of time, like if I had to build this into a traditional rig setup, and looking at the price of what I spent on everything and the time, there's like a $60 one, I think. Now don't quote me, but I think you can get like a $60 one off of Amazon for like, it's a 6-card rig. And I feel like for $60, that's a great deal. Now, don't go out and buy like your Veta frames or anything like that, but if you're really looking to keep your costs down by building your own frame, consider going with something like the one I'll link down below, and I'll throw it up on screen now. I haven't seen it recently, but I'll find it, and I believe it was $60, because if I was to go ahead and take the cost of everything to do that, and then also my time, I feel like the $60 would be well worth it. But that's just something to consider. Totally up to you. For me, this was a really fun project. I don't know that I'll build any more of my own frames, but this was a lot of fun to do. So this upcoming week, we will be going ahead and installing all the rest of these 6600s. We have our Sapphire Pulse, our 2 power colors, our Gigabyte Eagle, and our 2 XFX Swifts. And I'm excited to get this in. This will be my most efficient rig right here, and I'm eager to get this thing built and hashing on Ethereum. We are wasting money right now. So anyways, end of the week, we'll get this built. We'll have the power supplies in. I'll do a full build video for you guys. You guys have really enjoyed those. Other than that, guys, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about the frame, about the experience, where I got things, the price of things, I'm completely transparent. I have nothing to hide. I'll give you guys links to everything under the sun that I can. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. Take care.